Okay. Emmy smiled. "That's really nice," she said. "I'm sure he'll love it, but..." "But are you sure I shouldn't do anything?" Johnny interjected. "I mean, what if that guy is dangerous?" "I'll look into it. You just keep it under your hat for now, all right?" "But..." Both of Ben's eyebrows arched up this time, stopping Johnny mid-sentence. Johnny slowly nodded. "All right. Now, how about it? You want to help me on this thing?" he asked, patting the back of the wheelchair. "Sure, but how?" Ben peered over the top of his glasses. "Remember that experiment you told me you tried? Storing electricity from lightning? I was wondering if you kept after it. Might suggest an alternate charging option, if the battery will accept that charge. Might be we can find a way to use something else to recharge it. These batteries die pretty quick." I haven't done anything with that experiment since Deputy Miller told me to stay off the water tower. "Didn't you tell me the dangerous work was already done? The wires are still out there, right?" Johnny thought for a second. "Yeah." "And you already connected them to the rod on the tower, right?" "Uh-huh." "Battery still out there? Unless someone took it." "Then it seems to me all you gotta do is stay on the ground, connect the wires to the battery, and wait for the storm. Am I missing something?" "Yeah, it's November. We won't see any more lightning this year," Johnny lamented. Ben frowned. "Is that so? I suppose the weather Bernu and the Farmer's Almanac must be wrong then. Wouldn't be the first time." He pushed the wheelchair back into the corner. "What did they say?" "Big storm's coming this weekend." "But Johnny's probably right. What do they know?" Johnny held up his hands. "Hey, I'm game if you think it might help." "Never know until you try," Ben noted. "But you do need to get your folks' permission. You hear?" Johnny nodded, not sure how he would accomplish that. "All right." Ben turned to grab his cleaning supplies. The kids took that as their signal to leave, and began walking to the door. Just then, Johnny remembered something. "Hey, do you know anything about the symbols around town?" he asked. "What symbols you talking about?" Ben asked, gathering a bucket and the mop he called Sapita. One was of 2 diamonds, like on the playing cards. Another was the number 8 with a line down the middle of it. "Oh, you mean the hobo code," Ben stated flatly, setting down his things. Hobos have a code?" Emmy questions. "They sure do. A whole lot of them. They scratch them in the fence posts and such to leave notes for others that come behind. Some are warnings. Others are about where to get food and such. 2 diamonds mean to stay quiet around here. And the number 8 with the slash means church folks live about. They're usually more generous. We also saw one with 2 W's, Emmy noted, and one more with a hat and a pointy brim. Johnny said, "Well, if I got it right, the first one ain't W's. They's teeth. Means a vicious dog lives there. And the hat one I never saw. Can't say what that means." Emmy suddenly remembered something. "Oh, what about the designs on the coffin?" "I forget about those," Johnny admitted. "I forgot about those," Johnny admitted. Ben's eyebrows rose. "Symbols on a coffin? What symbols?" Johnny sketched them on a piece of paper. "Those ain't hobo code," Ben said. "Are you sure?" said Emmy. "Very. That's something completely different. Something I know too well." Johnny's brow furrowed. "What?" "Symbols from the Underground Railroad." Johnny and Emmy looked at each other, eyes wide. "Wait, the Underground Railroad?" she said. "The one Harriet Tubman worked on?" Ben nodded solemnly. "One and the same. Usually, you'd find them symbols on quilts hanging on the line back in the day. Before slavery was abolished, they gave runaway slaves directions on the safest way to travel, or warned them about dangers in the area. The first one with all the squares in it is called Crossroads. So when the runaways slaves saw that, they knew to travel to the main crossroads in Cleveland, Ohio. That's so neat, Emmy squealed. That second pattern is called bow ties. Since most slaves was in tattered clothes, they was easy to spot. When they saw this pattern, they knew the owner of the house would give them nice clothes so they could blend in with the free blacks along the way. But why would the symbol be carved on a coffin lid? Johnny asked. Folks is clever, that's why. Ben set his bucket on the floor and then set Serpenta in the bucket and leaned her on the handle. In those days, it wasn't unusual for a coffin to be made ahead of time, preparing for the inevitable. You see, undertakers would leave them outside, leaned up against the wall to keep water from pooling up inside them. He leaned forward, his voice getting lower and softer. There was them coffins, just standing there. People walking by, trying to ignore 'em. But out of the corner of their eye, they saw 'em. And when they did, all they could think of was that they was boxes of death. That one day, they'd be inside a box like that, waiting to meet their maker. But he straightened up, and his voice became stronger and a bit proud. That box they saw weren't no box of death. It was a box of life. It sat outside like a beacon pointing runaway slaves to freedom. Pretty smart, Johnny said, putting the directions on something no one wanted to look at. But how did the slaves know to look? Emmy asked. Ben smiled. Because, child, one of the main leaders of the Underground Railroad was a Quaker man by the name of Levi Coffin. Emmy's jaw dropped. We were looking at a piece of history? An important one, too. Johnny was still puzzled. But that doesn't explain why the coffin was down in the crawl space, or who the woman was. I'm not convinced it was a woman, Ben said. But we heard them say so, Emmy persisted. They moved it several times. I can't do this any longer. This is a very uncomfortable pose. Back on the lamppost. That's better. Okay, where were we? And why would they do that? Ben asked. Why not just bury it someplace permanent, or dispose of it someplace where no one would even notice it? No, there's more to this than meets the eye. But they called her by name, Johnny blurted. Ben stiffened. You didn't tell me that. Sure I did. He paused, thinking. Didn't I? Emmy shook her head. No. I wondered why, but I figured you had your reasons. Johnny shook his head. Everything going on in his life at the moment had begun to jumble into one big confusing pool. I guess I just didn't think of it. Ben rested Sapida's handle against the workbench and fixed his gaze on Johnny. What was the name? Rakia? They said her name was Rakia. A shadow moved over Ben's face, like a cloud passing in front of the sun. Ben, did you know her? Rakia? Emmy asked. He hesitated for a moment, lost in thought. Maybe, he admitted. Though, if it's who I think it is, I know her by another name. Johnny and Emmy exclaimed glances. What name? Yes. Ben scowled at him. Never you mind. Does it have to do with the Underground Railroad? Emmy asked gently. Ben slowly shook his head, and his voice dropped to a low growl. No, girl, it has nothing to do with that. Sadness filled Ben's eyes, and pain formed in the lines in his face. Sometimes, Ben almost whispered, folks use holy vessels for unholy purposes. He picked up the bucket and Sapita and walked out the door. Emmy looked at Johnny. What was that about? She asked. I don't know. Johnny said, there's obviously more going on here than we thought, and Ben might be the missing piece of the puzzle.